She wasn't the plaintiff. She wasn't the defendant. She wasn't even the lead attorney when the case started. But by the time this 6-week defamation trial ended, millions of people worldwide weren't just talking about the two people suing each other. They were talking about her. One attorney's cross-examination became one of the most watched legal moments of the decade, clipped, replayed, and studied by law students and practicing attorneys alike. And by the end of the trial, she'd been promoted, hired by a major news network, and turned into something almost unheard of in the legal world. A celebrity, created entirely by her performance in a courtroom. Today, we're breaking down exactly what she did differently, the actual legal technique, not just the viral clips. In 2022, actor Johnny Depp filed a $50 million defamation lawsuit against his ex-wife, actor Amber Heard, over a Washington Post op-ed she had written. The trial was televised live for 6 weeks, an almost unprecedented level of public access to a civil case of this size. One of Depp's attorneys was Camille Vasquez, a litigator who had worked with him for years on other legal matters before this trial. And over the course of that trial, her cross-examination technique became the single most discussed element of the entire case, arguably more discussed than the verdict itself. Today, we're not weighing in on the underlying allegations between Depp and Heard. That's not what this channel is for. We're breaking down the actual courtroom technique Vasquez used, why it worked on a jury, and what it teaches us about how cross-examination functions as a legal tool. Here's the first technique that defined Vasquez's approach, and it's one of the oldest, most effective tools in cross-examination, tying every single question back to something the witness had already said on the record, in a deposition, or in a recording, months or years earlier. According to Vasquez's own account of her strategy, she structured her cross-examination around specific audio recordings the couple had made of their arguments during the relationship, and prior statements Heard had made in earlier depositions. This is a deliberate legal technique. When a witness's live testimony contradicts something they said earlier, under oath or on record, it creates what attorneys call an impeachment opportunity, a moment where the jury sees, in real time, a witness's story shifting. You don't need to raise your voice or attack a witness to accomplish this. You just need iron-tight preparation and a paper trail. The confrontation happens automatically once the inconsistency is visible to the jury. The second technique legal analysts pointed to afterward was Vasquez's ability to keep a witness answering the specific question asked, rather than allowing them to expand into broader narrative territory. One trial attorney who reviewed the cross-examination for the press noted that Vasquez maintained excellent control over the witness, keeping her locked onto the specific facts being challenged, rather than letting her drift toward more sympathetic, harder-to-challenge territory. This is a core cross-examination skill, leading questions that can only be answered yes or no, asked in tight, controlled sequences, so a witness has very little room to reframe the story in their own words. This matters because direct examination, when your own side calls a witness, allows for open, narrative-style storytelling. Cross-examination flips that entirely. The attorney, not the witness, is supposed to control the pace and direction of the testimony. Analysts who reviewed the trial specifically credited this discipline as a key reason the cross-examination was effective. Here's a subtler technique that doesn't get discussed as often, but several legal commentators pointed directly at it: body language and delivery. Multiple observers noted that during her testimony, Heard frequently turned to face the jury directly when answering questions, a pattern some legal analysts suggested came across as rehearsed or performative rather than natural, potentially undermining her credibility in the eyes of jurors. Whether or not that was actually the intent, the observation itself reveals something important about trial strategy. A skilled cross-examiner doesn't just craft questions to expose inconsistencies in words. They create conditions where a witness's own delivery and body language do additional work in front of the jury. This is why experienced trial attorneys spend enormous time preparing witnesses for how to testify, not just what to say. The manner of an answer can matter as much as its content. Here's the detail that turned this from a notable legal performance into a cultural moment. For the first time, a case of this scale was live-streamed, in full, to a massive global audience with no legal background whatsoever. That audience wasn't evaluating the case the way 12 trained jurors do. They were reacting the way people react to any compelling television, to confidence, to composure, to someone who looked completely in control of the room. Vasquez's technique wasn't designed to go viral. It was designed to win over a jury. It just happened to also translate perfectly to a global audience watching a live stream, which turned a legal strategy into an internet phenomenon almost overnight. Here's the actual lesson underneath all the viral clips. Effective cross-examination has almost nothing to do with dramatic confrontation, and everything to do with preparation, control, and precision. The most powerful moments in this trial weren't loud. They were quiet, methodical, and built entirely on documentation gathered long before the trial ever started. That's the opposite of how television usually portrays great trial lawyers, and it's exactly why real attorneys, not just casual viewers, took this cross-examination so seriously. You'll probably never be cross-examined in a nationally televised trial, but the underlying principle here applies far beyond a courtroom. Consistency matters. What you say today can be compared against what you said before in a text message, an email, a recorded conversation, and inconsistencies are what erode credibility. Whether you're in a courtroom, a negotiation, or a difficult conversation with someone in your own life. If breaking down the real legal technique behind headline trials instead of just the drama is what you come here for, subscribe. This channel does exactly that every single week. And if you want to see how a completely different legal strategy won one of the most famous criminal trials in American history, I broke that down right here.